Joining us live is the Deputy Opposition Leader, Sussan Lee. Sussan, good to see you. Thanks for your time. So Philip Lowe with a shot at the Prime Minister last night, urging him to make workplaces more flexible and productive. What are your thoughts on his comments?
Well, clearly his comments underscore, Pete, the importance of productivity being the main response that the Australian government needs to provide across multiple workplaces that are now worried about its industrial relations bill. And the remarks from the Governor of the Reserve Bank certainly underscore the position that we're taking, which is that this is exactly the wrong time to introduce this radical industrial relations reform. Analysis that the Coalition put out yesterday relating specifically to small business shows that 56,000 small businesses would be dragged to the table for multi-employer bargaining. And you know, people haven't seen widespread strikes in this country for a long time, but I certainly remember them from the 1970s, and what they will do is put the brake on productivity even more. And, you know, businesses are anxious, Pete. This is not just the Coalition with a political argy-bargy. This is us caring about the small businesses that we represent. I had a contact from a small bakery in an area that's under flood in my electorate yesterday, but they still found time to write to me to say, whoa, you know, I do not want this new radical, well, they probably didn't use the word radical, but this new extreme industrial relations changes in my business, not now.
Right. But what Dr. Lowe is essentially saying is that businesses should be able to sack people in an unsteady environment. So do you think businesses should have the freedom to do that?
We have a very strong Fair Work Commission set of arrangements in this country, so we're not starting from scratch here. What the government is trying to do is, on top of the system that we have that has the Fair Work Commission very much involved when there are disputes between employers and employees, what we are now seeing is the government wanting to overlay something that, by the way, Pete, they never took to the election. I mean, this is the point here. They're ramming something through in the last 2 weeks of Parliament, trying to get it through the back door. There is no way they would have got it through the front door.
But back on Dr. Lowe's comments.
Did you hear about any of this?
Sure, yeah, but Dr. Lowe's point, what he's essentially saying is that we're in for tough times ahead. Businesses should be able to sack people if they are so tight. So do you think that businesses should be able to do that? They should have the flexibility to do that?
I think the current arrangements with the Fair Work Commission should prevail, and I'll leave Dr. Lowe to make his own remarks and others to make their analysis of those remarks. What we're concerned about is this overlay that will allow unions to enter workplaces where they've never been before, across enterprises that are so broad in scope that they can't even describe how broad they would be, and catch people in economy-wide strikes.
Right, but if we're in for tough times, and I mean, businesses would have to face a choice of whether they keep their staff or whether they actually close down their business.
The small businesses that I see, and I meet them almost every day when I'm not in this building, Pete, care about their staff. They know that their staff are critical to their success. And this is the whole point here. This is not setting up employees against employers. We passed that long ago. And for the government to try and drag us back to that is misrepresenting the real world. And we know that small businesses provide so much in terms of employment, in terms of productivity, in terms of the diversity of our economy, particularly in regional areas that I represent. OK,
Labor says it will make concessions to get the bill through. An inquiry has recommended boosting that threshold for small businesses to be roped into 20 staff members as a minimum. So it's just a slight increase of 5. Does that change your calculations at all?
No, it doesn't. The 56,000 small businesses affected is still exactly the same.
But that's between 15 and 200, right?
Yes, but I note that the committee, every business, by the way, Pete, is affected. Every business. You know, even the changes that are proposed
between
for
20 and
sole
200.
traders. 20 and 200 is still affected. 0 to 15, 15 to 20. You can pick any number you like. Now, I looked at briefly at this report that the committee handed down. I'm going to study it in greater detail. Of course, it was more Labor members on the committee, so it's unsurprising. They did make that very modest change, lifting 15 to 20, but that's not going to make a difference. You know, we know that the effect this is going to have on small businesses is incredibly bad. And also, If in fact small business supports it, why can't the Minister for Small Business name one single small business? Just one. There's just over 2 million, by the way, small businesses in the country. Just name one business that actually supports this and thinks it will work for them and work for their employees.
Is there any number that you would settle on as a minimum for a small business?
The whole bill is terrible. The whole bill is terrible. Small business, and you only have to look at who is lining up to criticise this. The Council of Small Businesses, Business Association, the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I met manufacturers yesterday around the table in Parliament House from the Australian Industry Group, all concerned about this bill, obviously about the cost of energy. Many of them remember, Pete, the promise the government made coming into the election that they'd reduce your electricity bill by $275. They don't remember their promise that the government made to introduce this radical industrial relations reform. Well, that certainly was incredibly sneaky.
That was going to be my last question here, Susan. You had these comments from the OECD last night. It's warned electricity and gas prices to double year on year to the highest levels since 1970s. A lot of this is out of government control, but Labor's still trying to work out what to do on that point. But what are your thoughts on the OECD warning?
Well, I think the Treasurer should spend less time working on his question time answers and, the cameos that he provides, and actually sit at the tables that we sit at, talking to manufacturers who have their gas prices going up sometimes 5 times, who are actually saying they'll move their manufacturing business offshore. And, that's not an empty threat, that's reality. These conditions, when it comes to the energy crunch, were in place before the election. The government knew about them. They then, with all of that information, promised that your electricity bill would come down by $275. That was a completely broken promise. It was a misrepresentation. Instead, they've spent all their time working up their debt to the unions and ramming through this industrial relations legislation, they think, by the end of this year.
Susan Lee, we'll leave it there. Appreciate your time, though. We'll talk to you again soon.